Thank you.
Cool. Good afternoon, Sergeant Major, Sergeant Major Hollis, as well as my classmates and distinguished guests. Today I'll be providing an unclassified informational brief on Stand 9, which involves the civilian casualties. At this historical marker, I'd like to point you to the direction of Sam Ravel's store. As well, you can see the Broadway view from Councilman's Line, the post office, including the grocery stores. I would like to use the acronym CLP to describe the tactical portion that occurred during the conflict. The C describes when the war began to commence, the civilians that was trapped within the town. Also, 18 civilians was killed during the battle, and unfortunately, even an unborn child was killed. The L stands for looting. The surrounding stores during that time was broken into as well as looted. And the P stands for pre-planned positions of protection of the civilians' casualties or the civilians before the raid that occurred. What I'd like to discuss now is a brief description that happened on that fatal day. Poncheville raid of 1916 is the only time where American civilians were killed during a ground battle between Americans and a foreign army on American soil since the war of 1812. During the raid, numerous civilians were trapped within the town, as well as some was killed and many were injured. As stated before, the surrounding buildings was broken into as well as looted during that day and time. Mr. James Dean, he also was a store owner. Unfortunately, he was gunned down and his body was discovered at the intersection of Broadway and Main. The local druggist, Charles Miller, body also was discovered at the intersection of Broadway and East Boundary. Mr. Miller resided in the Hoover Hotel, as stated before, in Stand 8. Once he heard the fighting commence, he came down and he decided upon himself to run to his druggist's store to obtain and retrieve some rifles to bring back for the fight. Unfortunately, he did not make it across the street before he was shot and mortally wounded. Mr. Milton James, who I'd like to discuss now. Milton James, as well as his wife Betty James, they resided in a wooden home north of the railroad tracks. Once the fighting also commenced, Milton took it upon himself with his wife to move forward towards the north, headed towards, once again, Hoover Hotel. The purpose is for the shelter for the prevention of the fight. Once they arrived to the western side of the Hoover Hotel, Mr. Milton, as well as his wife, was gunned down. Milton entered into Hoover's hotel and several civilians ran out and retrieved Miss Bessie. Once she entered into the hotel, unfortunately, she died and the unborn baby as well because of the injuries. What's significant was that the citizens of Columbus, they was very aware and they was not ignorant of the possibility of the Mexican raiders could attack their town. Purposely, what they did was the leaders of the town had occasional drills for such an event. They focused on the Hoover Hotel as well as the school's house that was made out of a brick building, which both items currently exist today. What's significant about these events is the warrior ethos. The warrior ethos identifies, I will not leave a fallen comrade. Several civilians in the Hoover Hotel came out and retrieved Miss Bessie and also the unborn child by bringing them in regarding of safety for themselves. That's what's very significant about this conflict. At this time, this concludes my briefing. With that stated, are there any questions within the audience?
Yes, I have a question.
Who?
Were the civilian casualties entirely the result of Vista's action?
I would tell you the question stated, were the civilians' casualties was a result of the Vista's action? My assessment based on the events, it could be a possibility because of the war was fought during the night seasons. It could have been a friendly fire because of the fact it was nighttime. So that's just the assessment that could have occurred during that particular time. With that stated, that concludes my briefing, and I'll be followed by Stand 10.